Final Fantasy. The very first in the iconic series, one of the most historically important JRPGs of all time and the start of a trending. Classic for its battle mechanics side by side in screens that somehow resemble simple menus. A unique job system was also introduced for your 4 playable characters. It's a short but fun adventure, still cool to play nowadays, if merely out of curiosity to see how it all began with this franchise. Phantasy Star. Another beginning of an iconic series and one of the earliest science fiction JRPGs in existence. It stands out for having a female heroine in a story-driven adventure. You follow Alice in a quest to avenge the death of her brother. Like many other games from this era, it was also cryptic and very hard, especially for its long mazes viewed in first person. A great soundtrack, cast of characters, and neat battle mechanics played in turns. Dragon Warrior. We're still going with classic starts on important RPG franchises. Dragon Warrior, originally known as Dragon Quest, is probably among the most beloved on the NES. Threw the series into success right from the beginning, revolutionized the industry of turn-based gaming forever, and so it became a pioneer in the genre in Japan as the godfather of them all. Is 1. Again, for this era, the TurboGrafx version is the best, and it will continue to be so until another remake of both games on the PSP. They were known as Ys Books 1 and 2, available on the same release of the TurboGrafx, known as the PC Engine in Japan. Just like in its sequel, we follow the adventures of adult Christine into an epic journey in search for the mystical books of Ys. Fantastic game, short adventure, easy to understand with fast-paced action and great controls. Another one with a kick-ass soundtrack that most fans will never ever forget. Final Fantasy IV. Known as Final Fantasy II on the SNES, it came about to start a revolution in the genre. It was one of the pioneers of heavily story-driven RPGs, with a major focus on its cast of characters. We follow the struggle of the knight Cecil as he slowly realizes the world of politics is nothing but corruption, inclusive of an impressive evolution of the battle mechanics played in turns, also celebrated for its unique design in some of the bosses. Final Fantasy IV was a masterpiece for its time. It is a very important piece that truly changed the course of history of Japanese role-playing games. Dragon Warrior IV. The memorable and beloved Dragon Quest IV that took everything positive from its predecessors and did it right. Story divided into several different characters, meaning it works as an episodic game. Nice world, nice battles, nice interface, nice graphics, nice everything. Dragon Warrior IV is not only the best JRPG of the NES, but also of 1992. Secret of Mana. One of the most iconic action RPGs ever made, beautiful, charming and nostalgic. It is Seiken Densetsu 2, a sequel to Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy. There's really no reason to talk about this excellent game on the Super Nintendo, as everybody's already familiar with it, especially thanks to the revival of the series with the most recent collection and a remake it got a few years ago. Shining Force. However, I gotta give the throne to a strategy RPG. I'm not saying it's better than the 2 previous titles, I'm just saying it was more iconic, simply because it popularized grid-based tactical JRPGs in the West before other major titles did. Shining Force was the true start of a memorable and important franchise that tried to offer a friendlier approach to the genre. It came along with a reliable story, with a huge cast of characters. Soundtrack was so Genesis, so cool, so rocking. My biggest praise goes to its battle system, with an excellent interface, easy to maneuver, with a new take on the combat animations. Truly a quintessential journey that opened the doors for strategy RPGs into the West. Breath of Fire. The start of Capcom's iconic and popular RPG franchise, the first in the series that follows the quest of Ryu, the Dragonkind, and Nina, the Winged Girl. Alongside many different characters, together they journey the world to find Ryu's sister and overthrow an evil empire. Turn-based experience with neat battle mechanics, awesome pixel art, neat graphics for its time, and a very memorable soundtrack. Final Fantasy VI. At last, the masterpiece, the icon, one of the absolute best RPGs in Final Fantasy, of the Super Nintendo and of 1994. A junction of masterful music with storytelling that excels every single game of this generation. Its remarkable and unique cast of characters, their deep and emotional journey, the amazing graphics and pixel art, everything connects perfectly with its battle and gameplay mechanics. Final Fantasy VI was a striking inspiration for role-playing games and one of the most important stories ever made in their history. Chrono Trigger. The popular game that brought together the developers of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. Many different amazing people work on this enormous project that ended up becoming one of the most historically important JRPGs of all time. Incredible soundtrack, excellent script, charismatic cast of characters, and a memorable battle system to never forget. Phantasy Star 4: The End of the Millennium. The game not only became a closure to a major science fiction saga of RPGs, but also the epitome of the series. Everything was done right, from the beautiful graphics to its mind-blowing futuristic soundtrack, way ahead of its time. An exceptional plot with an illustrious party of characters also made a big contribution to its glory. And those manga-style cutscenes, man, they were a very unique way to tell the story. While Chrono Trigger was more of a beginner's RPG, Phantasy Star 4 became a legend among hardcore players. In my eyes, the best video game of 1995. Super Mario RPG: The Legend of the Seven Stars. This masterpiece was the collaboration of Nintendo and Squaresoft, and one of the very first JRPGs I ever played. Everything in this game was amazing, from its highly original turn-based battle mechanics involving timing and precision, to its excellent graphics, music, and controls. It still feels like a true Super Mario game while delving deep into its role-playing mechanics. Absolutely imperative as one of the last JRPGs localized to North America for the Super Nintendo. Suikoden. Suikoden changed everything in the shadows, while other simple titles got the recognition instead. It offered a heartbreaking story full of political drama, but with a lot of charisma at the same time. Its 3 totally different battle mechanics, its 108 recruitable characters, its outstanding soundtrack. I think I've praised this series and this game enough to convince you why I believe it's the best RPG of 1996. Wild Arms. You already know what this cool game is about, with its 3 main different characters and their journey across the wild, wild west, but with small science fiction elements. Absolutely a beloved title among the best of 1997. Final Fantasy VII. I truly was astonished to learn that these 9 were the only JRPGs released in North America this year. I am serious and I still can't believe it. My theory goes to Final Fantasy VII's success, with publishers releasing most of the localized games until the next year. I guess nobody wanted or could compete against one of the most revolutionary RPGs of all time. Pokémon Red and Blue. These twins were released in 1996 in Japan, but the localization apparently took 2 years. They are one and the same game with some usual variations. The very first Pokémon game ever created, called Pocket Monsters in its own country of origin. The start of one of the best-selling video game franchises in history. Final Fantasy Tactics. The revolutionary title in the series, the spin-off that popularized the strategy RPGs in the West. Developed by both Square and the Ogre series creator Yasumi Matsuno, this beloved title changed the world. It was a very hard game, but entirely rewarding and quite addictive to play. Also with an incredibly well-written story, mature, full of war, drama, and tragedy. Parasite Eve. This masterpiece needs no introduction. A sacred creation by Hironobu Sakaguchi and Takashi Tokita based on a Japanese novel. Very unique battle system mixing action with real-time elements. And of course, a fusion between role-playing and survival horror in an outstanding story just full of brilliance. Xenogears. Don't say you weren't expecting to see this enormous icon in the history of RPGs here. The best science fiction title in the genre, with the best story ever written for one. No other JRPG compares in its character development and its mind-blowing plot twists. Let's not forget about its incredible soundtrack, its neat battle mechanics, and their amazing combos for each type of character. Xenogears is, perhaps objectively speaking, the most representative game of this year and possibly the absolute best. Star Ocean: The Second Story. Star Ocean 2 was a confusing game because, as the title implies, it appeared to be a sequel. The first one was released on the Super Famicom only in Japan, until its Western release several years later on the PSP. Either way, this was a standalone title and a fantastic RPG that threw the series into commercial success, mainly for its long and well-written story, its engaging battle mechanics, its beautiful soundtrack, and its 86 different endings. Suikoden 2. At last, the masterpiece, the best JRPG of 1999. The one that lay dormant during many years until fans dug it up and spread the word of its brilliance. Rough translation and poor marketing made it fail at first, with its limited print run making it years later a very rare game. Suikoden 2 took over the awesomeness of its predecessor and did everything completely better. Its 3 different battle systems were fantastic, its longer and deeper story was fantastic too, its soundtrack, interface, graphics. I swear, I will never get tired of praising this overwhelmingly great JRPG. Breath of Fire 4. The best in the series in my opinion again, but I really think this was the epitome. Sadly, it was the last true Breath of Fire after it perished 2 games later. It's a very conceptual RPG with beautiful art, 2 different points of view. Oh, and its combat here, I liked it a lot, with 3 party members up front and the rest right in the back. I wish more RPGs would let you do something like that. Grandia 2. Grandia 2 was another big hit on the Dreamcast, possibly the best RPG there. Story is unrelated to the first game, now with a darker sense of humor. Still, it retained its charm, colorful nature, its comedy beats, and very likable characters. I felt, however, the battle system had improved drastically as it was more engaging and fun this time. And those in-game graphics? I don't know why they look so neatly done on the Dreamcast. But anyway, Grandia 2 is of course one of the best JRPGs of the year 2000. The Legend of Dragoon. Sony's big RPG project that had way more success in the West than in Japan. A long game that stood out for its amazing cutscenes with a different style in animation, interactive battles with that little extra push with the combos and the awesome Dragoon transformations. No argument here, it is one of the best JRPGs of this archetypal year. Valkyrie Profile. Speaking about archetypal, here's Valkyrie Profile, another huge project from the late 90s. It's another one of my personal favorites, with a strong focus on its dark and tragic story. Following the arduous existential crisis of Lenneth Valkyrie and her questioning of the war, the gods, and her own purpose. A masterful soundtrack brimming with all kinds of emotions, including the iconic battle system played in turns, side by side. 2D platforming with some puzzles involved, beautiful artwork everywhere. Let me praise as well the pixels, sprites, and animations, and okay, that's enough, let's move on. Final Fantasy IX. The last game in the series with a story written by the man himself, going back to its medieval roots with small steampunk elements. A true Final Fantasy game, a memorable cast of characters, an extremely charming and interesting plot, a stimulating battle system, music packed with nostalgia. This game just had everything it needed to be yet another masterpiece in this year. Chrono Cross. Following the huge success and influence of Chrono Trigger, a spin-off was designed in the form of a text-adventure game, what we nowadays call a visual novel. Radical Dreamers was its name, but it stayed in Japan for a long time, exclusive for an add-on called the Satellaview, and developer Masato Kato was never satisfied. Some years later, Squaresoft gave him full control to develop a full-fledged RPG based on it, and the outstanding result was Chrono Cross. Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X was a sensation of this year, when all types of fans of the series embraced the PlayStation 2 era. However, it was also the first game in the main line that started to feel different from its predecessors. Nevertheless, it remained a true classic and a JRPG beloved by millions of people out there. Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts was the spiritual successor of Kudelka on the PS1. It had a dark story with a very cynical protagonist involving demons, psychological twists, and the First World War. All this packed with an amazing battle system legendary for its Judgment Ring, deciding the amount of damage. This game just had to be number one, as it is definitely the best of 2001. Suikoden 3. Suikoden 3 is yet another game with 4 different main characters, each in their own story, missions, party members, and areas. How this story played out to intrinsically connect them all was marvelous. This excellent game charms you from the start, offering you a variety in battle lore with 3 cool systems intertwined. Chris also became a personal favorite in female protagonists. I love this game, man. No other in this list comes even close, so it felt right to crown it as the best JRPG of 2002. Disgaea, Hour of Darkness. The start of yet another iconic series, mainly known for its silly humor and cynical shenanigans. It's a joke of a story, revolving around demons, preemies, and overlords. A brutally hard strategy RPG, perhaps the hardest of the series, infamous for being a big, fat grind fest. Disgaea was so successful, it spawned several sequels, including a bunch of ports and remasters. Definitely one of the best JRPGs of 2003. Xenosaga Episode 1. Another episodic game that turned out to be very different with each entry. The first episode, however, was released in 2002, but we got it until 2003. This excellent science fiction game marked the beginning of a memorable trilogy of turn-based RPGs, a spiritual successor to Xenogears, known for its heavy and deep focus in its story, its long cutscenes, and its unique cast of characters. Let's not forget about its 2 combat modes, one with the characters themselves and the other with the mechs they pilot. Xenosaga Episode 1 makes the 2003 equation just perfect. Fire Emblem: The Blazing Blade. Also known as the Blazing Sword, its subtitle was removed from a rather dumb reason. Since it was the very first Fire Emblem released outside of Japan, they simply took it off. Even though it's the 7th title in the series and a prequel to a game we never got. Anyway, this masterpiece is without a doubt one of the best in the franchise, the best RPG on the Game Boy Advance, and much graciously, the king of 2003. Shadow Heart's Covenant. The long-awaited sequel to the King of 2001. Covenant follows the events at the end of the first game, with some new characters in the party, including a very interesting heroine and a plot twist near the end. Gameplay-wise, this excellent game carried on the legacy of the amazing battle system and did it better. Graphics, music, interface, etc. were highlighted as well. Shadow Heart's Covenant was a very balanced game and one of the greatest RPGs of 2004. Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean. One of the most unique JRPGs of all time, the masterpiece Baten Kaitos. Among the best stories ever written for one, luring the gamer with its twists and diverse cast. Lovely graphics and mind-blowing artwork, while the soothing soundtrack by Motoi Sakuraba flows in. Yes, there's the use of cards for everything here, including armor, which gave it a big touch of brilliant originality. Baten Kaitos is, without a doubt, one of the kings of 2004. Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. The only reason this tough guy beat Baten Kaitos on the first place is because of its legacy. The historical importance of it, the first game in the main SMT series we ever got, and one of the hardest JRPGs of all time. It just felt right to crown this extremely influential game that spammed greatness in the shadows. It became a cult following monster as it threw the series into a commercial success. Radiata Stories. created by Tri-Ace as a love letter to Suikoden, since you can also recruit dozens of characters here to join your ranks. Splendid story that shines with charisma all around it, just like its memorable world and its many inhabitants. Radiata Stories is a forgotten gem nowadays that you need to remember. It's one of the best of 2005. Dragon Quest VIII. I've always said there was a big jump, graphically speaking, from the last entry and this one. With the help of Level 5, Square Enix created a gigantic game with an enormous world and a deep, story-driven adventure. Once again, with the orchestral melodies this important series is known for. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. One of the greatest JRPGs on the Game Boy Advance, second best only to its predecessor, the Blazing Blade. Perhaps one of the most popular out there, considered as a favorite back in the day. An outstanding addition to the series, a perfect salutation for beginners and veterans alike. Fire Emblem: Path of Radiance. Several months later, after the release of the Sacred Stones, the fandom was ready to meet the masterpiece of the GameCube. Path of Radiance defined evolution in strategy RPGs in the highest level possible back then. I applaud the incredible invested story with its large cast of admirable characters, the carefully designed maps in all their tactical glory, a surprisingly exceptional soundtrack and a perfect interface. I wholeheartedly deliver the crown of 2005 to Ike and his legendary band of mercenaries. Kingdom Hearts 2. A sequel that far surpassed the first one, bringing many fans into the franchise. This is the only game in the series I really liked and finished. A magic adventure into the worlds of Disney and Final Fantasy, with some really deep and emotional moments right on spot. Final Fantasy XII. The big, huge project from Square Enix, and also quite the controversial game. This one changed the battle mechanics, goodbye turn-based forever in the series. It played in a resemblance to MMORPGs after the success of the previous entry, Final Fantasy XI. A long and great game, quite important this year, one of the best in 2006. Xenosaga Episode 3. Finally, the conclusion, the masterpiece, the game that surpassed its two predecessors by a landslide. Graphics, music, interface, frame rate, pacing, wow. Nobody complained about the combat now since it was just perfect. What an emotional and fantastic ending. It's still one of the absolute best JRPGs of 2006. Tales of Legendia. Legendia, I've always stood up for it and will always defend it to death. The most underrated title in the series, completely undeserving of its hatred. Let me also say that its uniqueness is precisely what made me love it so much, quite above all the others in the franchise. Valkyrie Profile 2, Silmeria. Hard to get into at first, but extremely addictive if you push forward and exploit it. A big grind fest, alright, totally worth the time and effort. It has a magnificent story, heartbreaking, with carefully designed and developed individuals. Highlighted graphics and music here, which helped carve its peak above the others as the masterpiece that is Valkyrie Profile 2. Suikoden 5. Suikoden 5 is my favorite, an RPG I've always believed to be slightly above the second game. Long adventure, detailed world, lore and story, vast amount of likable characters, and last but definitely not least, the 3 best battle systems in the entire series. I loved every single one of them to pieces. Suikoden 5 might have been the last main title, but as of today, it stands as the crown lord of 2006. Eternal Sonata. Even though this is the vanilla version, it's still a beautiful masterpiece. Its full display of art, music, and graphics is simply magnanimous. A game with a uniquely good battle system so hard to compare, mixing precise action with turns. Brimming with nostalgia and melancholy, the story takes your hand along with its remarkable group of characters, together unraveling the mystery of Frédéric Chopin's alleged dream. Persona 3. Speaking about vanilla versions, this is Persona 3, one game most people are already acquainted with. Regardless, it was the start of a new direction for the series, with overly addictive gameplay mechanics, still with its very dark touches embracing a deep and tragic story. Odin Sphere. Still in the vanilla pages here, now with yet another masterpiece. Yes, an extremely hard game, grindy but mostly sheltering the classic trial and error. Art that is just beyond gorgeous, peacefully synchronizing with its magnificent soundtrack. 5 different stories with 5 unique characters intersecting in yet another marvelous but tragic story. Growlancer, Heritage of War. One of the best JRPGs of 2007 is without a doubt this extremely obscure paragon. The pinnacle of the series, the 5th and final game to be published outside of Japan. Several story arcs involved, all uniting a true main route bound by decisions that affect the outcome. The supporting cast shines as usual in a strong sense of duty and friendship, but also harsh on betrayal and politics. .hack GU Trilogy. A gigantic game told in 3 volumes. Since part 2 and 3 were localized until 2007, I brought along the first game from 2006. You know it, taking control of a bunch of players in the fictitious MMORPG The World. One of the best stories ever written in a role-playing game because of its originality, its careful detail in the lore and writing, and of course the astounding character development shown here. This excellent action RPG is definitely the king of 2007. Persona 4. The vanilla version of this extremely popular and beloved game, a fantastic follow-up to its amazing predecessor, but with more light and less darkness. It still revolved around a rather twisted story, but its delightful cast of characters blended in with the colorful charm of the game. No questions asked, it is one of the best JRPGs of 2008 as well. Tales of Vesperia. Speaking of Tales of, Vesperia was also released this same year on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. However, we only got the latter for some reason. Nevertheless, it quickly became a commercial success and a personal favorite to many fans out there. It is indeed, as a matter of fact, one of the best in the series because it did nearly everything right. Valkyria Chronicles. Moving on to the start of a very addictive series of tactical RPGs, Valkyria Chronicles took influence from the XCOM games and did its transition to a fictional world war just right. Overbearing gameplay here, this excellent title simply became an authority in the genre. Its cel-shaded graphics, its enthusiastic cast of characters, and its dramatic story, they all cuddle up to create one of the best JRPGs of this year. Lost Odyssey. You know this one very well already, a great turn-based RPG created by the mastermind Hironobu Sakaguchi. Plot, music and graphics are so goddamn good, some people even dare say it is the true Final Fantasy XIII. Possibly because the storytelling itself is beyond brilliant with quite the unique concept. Lost Odyssey is simply superb, in high need of a modern re-release. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor. It was developed by Careersoft, the creators of Langrisser and Growlancer, along with Atlus. Another masterpiece, but extremely hard and unforgiving. Strategy RPG playing on grids, but with battles becoming turn-based when facing an enemy. Each character with their own pair of demons fighting along. Great music, great focus on its story, where the player's decisions truly affect the events of the game. Perhaps not the best version anymore to play nowadays, considering it's the Nightmare Vanilla, but still, even so, the absolute greatest JRPG of 2009. Ys 7. So Ys 7 was the first game in the series to include playable party members, also fighting by your side. I wasn't a fan at all of Ys, so that was a highlighted feature for me. I became an undying lover of this franchise thanks to this game. Most of the previous titles were short adventures, while this one truly felt longer, deeper, and overall more compelling. Without a doubt, the well-deserved second place of 2010. Nier. Of course, The King is my absolute favorite RPG of both the PS3 and 360. A masterpiece that gave way to genius Yoko Taro the support his career needed. With an overly warped and dark story with some very controversial twists and obnoxious fan service, Nier became a bizarre experience, and those are the ones that usually bedazzle me. By far, this action RPG, this Drakengard spin-off that's nowadays its own successful series, is the unquestionable overlord of the year 2010. Radiant Historia. Over the last few years, I was so eager to get to this one because of Radiant Historia, a rather unique and original game with great music by Yoko Shimomura, developed by Atlus and Headlock. One of the best stories ever written in a JRPG, revolving around a soldier and the power of a mysterious book that allows him to rewind time and alter the events. We meet again a turn-based combat with a touch of strategy, very well implemented. This is, without a single doubt, the remarkable first place of 2011. The Last Story. game that took the world by surprise because its name was literal, Sakaguchi's last written adventure on a video game. A fantastic action RPG with dark and baroque graphics, full of strategy and dexterity. Lovely story filled with good romance amongst the harsh truths of kingdoms, magics and treachery. Definitely inside the highest ranked RPGs on the Wii and one of the best of 2012. Xenoblade Chronicles. This is a role-playing game that threw the Xeno series into a ginormous commercial success. An action-adventure filled with science fiction within a specially crafted universe. Its real-time combat, relying on many different skills and combos, blew people's minds. Just as its boundless open world, its seamless possibilities, and its amazingly intricate story. Shin Megami Tensei 4. Atlus and their Megami Tensei series found a new home with Nintendo for some reason, so the long-awaited fourth main title of SMT remained an exclusive on the 3DS. An overly dark and mature story here with adult characters, brave challenge, overly difficult, a quest-driven bastard that carved its name on the stones of 2013. Tales of Xillia. Among my all-time favorites in this extensive series, it was the first PS3 game I owned and finished, to a complete bedazzlement. Graphics and art were absolutely outstanding, and so was the incredibly deep story. Loved the character development here. What stood out to me the most, however, was the fighting. This became, in my opinion, the epitome, the pinnacle of the franchise, precisely because of its perfected battle mechanics. So Tales of Xillia is, by far, the best JRPG of 2013. Tales of Xillia 2. Another sequel here is the king of this year. Gameplay-wise, it took everything done right with the first game and improved it. Now you had a new protagonist and a new conflict, but still dragging on the plot and the characters from Xillia 1. It was slightly darker with more story, tons of side quests and dashing graphics. Sometimes I think this game is even better than its predecessor. Regardless, it takes the very well-deserved first place in this list. Bloodborne. An amazing follow-up to the Soul series, and yet another take on the concept. This time it was the gothic, gruesome Victorian era, with visually stunning graphics. Some say it's way harder than any of its predecessors, and even better. I honestly won't apologize for agreeing with those statements, as Bloodborne is a truly magnificent game, but also a tough bastard to master. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, second chapter. 4 years had to elapse for fans outside of Japan to meet the long-awaited sequel. Once more, the amount of text to translate it was simply outrageous, but trust me, it was worth the wait. Alas, this excellent follow-up was digital only for both PC and the PSP, still with no physical release nowadays. God damn it, because it totally deserves one, as it is a great JRPG, even better than its lovely predecessor. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 2. Thankfully, fans didn't have to wait several years with this one as they did with Trails in the Sky 2, the direct and ambitious sequel to that great cliffhanger in the first game. Several small improvements were done to the gameplay, but overall it was the same graphic engine. However, I felt the story progression was better than before, just like its endearing battle mechanics. Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. Following the steps of its amazing predecessor, Apocalypse took the world by surprise. Since the original SMT4 was very quest-driven, developers decided to give the players a more linear approach. They totally nailed it here, cause gameplay-wise it felt completely superior. Story was still dark, twisted and carefully crafted, even though it now had some Persona-like stereotypes. And if the music was a masterpiece in the first game, this sequel was a ginormous eargasm like no other. Tales of Berseria. One of my personal favorites in the Tales series, with a story surprisingly dark and a twisted heroine bent on revenge. I guess the fighting here was a love it or hate it, considering it took elements from the complexity in Graces and Cesteria. In my opinion though, it did all right, achieving what those games couldn't. In the end, it turned out to be a fulfilling adventure with a great cast of characters. Nier Automata. No need to cover one of the strangest and darkest video games of this generation. With the help of a tremendously good gameplay mixing shooters with hack and slash, Automata easily thrived. Besides its complex but excellent story in a post-apocalyptic setting, you know very well what else helped accomplish its enormous success. Is 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. Here it is, Falcom's masterpiece, the pinnacle of its existence. 30 years of history and evolution of this wonderful series. Absolutely everything was done perfectly. Story, graphics, music, combat, characters, quests, exploration, interface, controls. Damn it, this could have been number 1, but just this time I'll cede the throne to you-know-who. I don't need to talk about this game. Instead, I'll just say this. I struggled a lot with these 5 JRPGs. Hours spent trying to decide which one was best. I'd love to call it a tie between them all because they're so freaking great! However, there's only room for one king in the throne of 2017, and that is for Persona 5. Octopath Traveler. Yet another incredibly amazing title taking influence from the Saga series. Hard to believe it was developed by the same people who created Tenchu and the Akiba games. They absolutely nailed it with this enormously beautiful game. Yes, it's a big grind fest, but with that battle system, man, how can you even resist? Definitely one of the best JRPGs of 2018. Dragon Quest XI. This one needs no introduction. You knew it was going to be the king of this year. The game that completely changed my mind on the Dragon Quest series. I became a huge fan of this astonishing wonder because the more I played, the more amazed I felt. Fire Emblem Three Houses. Yet another marvelous addition to the series, even though it didn't quite feel like a true Fire Emblem anymore. Regardless, it was still an overly fantastic game with its completely different roots and several memorable characters. So many new gameplay mechanics were introduced here that it simply became a very addictive RPG to play. Code Vein. One of the darkest adventures I've ever enjoyed in a video game. Always been a huge fan of post-apocalyptic and gothic stuff, so Code Vein enamored me even since the trailers. A very daring but highly addictive action RPG, full of strategy and challenge. Excellent graphics too, as well as a notoriously interesting character design, in all sense of the word. Yakuza Like a Dragon. This game is what I consider to be the first true RPG in the series, especially now that its battle system is played in turns. It surprised a lot of people, as a matter of fact, considering all the previous titles were open world adventure games. They always reminded me of Grand Theft Auto and even Shenmue, but being their own unique thing at the same time. With this new entry being a turn-based RPG, some of us might start seeing the series with a new light. The Legend of Heroes: Trails of Cold Steel 4. It wraps things up with a drastic all-out war in the continent of Cimmeria with Rian Schwarzer at its core. It took everything from its 3 previous episodes to convert it into gold. Still, with its excellent turn-based battle system, including the combos, the skill attacks, the great magics, and the famous S-crafts to wreak havoc in the battlefield. Last but definitely not least, its extremely well-polished story, which grounds the character progression uniquely. A large cast from all entries in this long-running series helps the building of one of the most incredible and outstanding RPGs ever made. And of course, the best of the year 2020. Tales of Arise. It's yet another excellent game, focusing on an amnesiac slave that joins a rebellion against the super oppressive race that dominates the world, accidentally involving the mysterious Shion of that very same race, but with her own hidden agenda. Great story, great characters, great development, graphics and music. It's a superb evolution of the Tales series. However, I've said many times before that the combat stood out amongst everything in this game. It's technical and very challenging, so you need to fight carefully to perform your combos, knowing when to use your artes and deciding if you'll use the blazing sword when the time is right during battle. The combination attacks between allies were badass as well. This is definitely one of the best JRPGs of 2021, no questions asked. Shin Megami Tensei 5. As always, Tokyo is about to be wiped out as the apocalypse draws near. To prevent that, a religious organization will hire the newly acquired powers of your main character, divine powers actually. So off you go to fight demons, recruit them even, and eventually choose if you'll fight against the organization, or keep fighting for them, or go your own twisted way. No more random encounters or hard to evade enemies on the map, so the navigation and exploration were excellent. The combat proved to be ridiculously addicting for how great it is, once again with its press turn system. If you exploit the enemy's weakness or get a critical by chance, you get 1 extra turn. Don't forget the enemy can do the same, so its brutal difficulty did not disappoint either. Masterpiece! This is among the best Shin Megami Tensei games ever made and also among the best JRPGs of 2021. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. I believe this to be the best story and cast in the series, also with the best combat, but that's because the faster the better for me, even if it's chaotic, as long as it isn't convoluted. Ys 9 wasn't. Taking place after all the previous games, Adol is suddenly imprisoned but successfully escapes. However, he'll need to hide his identity while uncovering the truth behind a bizarre rebellion stirring up the city. Especially since now he's acquired some dark powers that tie him to a small group of anti-heroes. But why is there another Adol still in prison? Why are there 2 Adols? Now that I've left you intrigued, go play the damn game. It's a masterpiece on par with the amazing Ys 8, the best JRPG of 2021. Star Ocean: The Divine Force. Just like in Star Ocean 2, we meet again a dual protagonist feature. Most events and gameplay will be identical, but several differences will be there depending on who you choose. Regardless, you can control any character you want during battle and exploration. The two are intertwined here as areas are expanded to let the player roam free a lot, but there is no screen separating the battles. With the ability of Duma, an artificial intelligence that joins the party, you can float around or dive into your enemies to ambush them. It also serves the important purpose of blindsiding them, something crucial to win the battles. Now, the game did have some resolution and frame rate issues, which once again, I believe it's unacceptable coming from a big studio like Square Enix. Fortunately, none of these issues hindered my progress, and I still had a blast playing this amazing RPG. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The world lives manipulated and oppressed by supreme beings known as the consuls. Two big factions are at constant war, and children are raised to be soldiers to fight even on their teens. Our 6 protagonists come from each faction, and upon a chance encounter, they'll join forces to stop the consuls and liberate the colonies. While connected to its 2 grand predecessors, it's mostly standalone and safe to start with. After all, it's beautifully balanced with excellent pacing and highly addictive combat. It's deep and complex, but so easy to understand and get into, nothing convoluted here. In both storytelling and world building, this is an incredible experience, so the fact that its gameplay and combat are on the same superb level makes this 3rd Xenoblade game a masterpiece. Triangle Strategy. This long-anticipated tactical beauty did not disappoint one bit. First an exclusive to the Switch, now on PC as well, developed by Square Enix and Ardink. It's one of those games with multiple routes and endings depending on your decisions. Most of these decisions come from using the Scales of Conviction, a mechanic in which your 8 main characters will decide the next course of action. Your MC can persuade them to join what you think is the best course of action, but it can get very tricky. Because of this, tensions and opinions will clash, especially near the end. Therefore, the story is really outstanding, extremely well written, and masterfully delivered through realistic moments and mature situations. There is barely any nonsensical BS here. Nearly every minute you spend reading will be worth your time. As a strategy RPG, combat is based on grids, with a camera that can be moved around despite its default isometric settings. There's a skill tree system based on materials that you get after battle or that you can buy from a merchant, but the combat isn't complicated. It is very challenging though, as most maps are really well thought out and the enemy AI can be very smart. It's a fantastic challenge and by far one of the best JRPGs of 2022. Octopath Traveler 2. We got this masterful sequel earlier this year to fully enjoy, this time across most modern platforms. No need to play the first game since this is a standalone game. It's also not as grindy like its predecessor, but it does get punishing near the end nonetheless. Back is the awesome battle system with the boost feature to do more damage, especially once you've broken the enemy's shields by abusing their weaknesses. New small additions are there like special skills known as latent powers. Story-wise, this is a fantastic script, and this time there is actually interaction between protagonists, chapters done in pairs even, and all of them coming together for the final boss and episode of this wonderful game. The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. The first place for me this year was a gruesome contest between this game and the previous 2. Honestly, any of them could be here, but I really needed to give it to this game. It is the final chapter in the entire Trails series, the one that ties all of them together and resolves in a phenomenal conclusion. While it took some liberties with the plot and characters, sometimes feeling like a fan service game, gameplay-wise it was simply incredible! Incredibly addicting, that is. Easy to play thanks to its supreme evolution in battle mechanics. It is a perfect turn-based system specifically designed for the player to break easily. epic boss fights, neat exploration, a large cast of characters and challenging post-game content. Even though it was released a few years ago in Japan, this is without a doubt my favorite JRPG released in 2023 in the West. Unicorn Overlord. This is an epic strategy RPG from Vanillaware. It follows the story of Alain in a revolution to fight off the oppressive new empire that took his mother's life. So you'll go around recruiting allies, some joining you automatically, others recruited by completing their quests. You do have an overworld with several small towns around, some of them can be liberated by fighting some small battles, and you can also leave a guard if you want to. Upon liberating them, you're able to interact with their shops and recruit specific class-based mercenaries to join you apart from your story characters. Regardless, everyone needs to be positioned within a group with a maximum of 6 spaces. Each group has a leader, of course, but no permadeath is here, and if they're defeated, another one takes their place. Battles are played on real time here. You need action points to summon a group or to use a special skill like a powerful attack or a healing spell. You'll always start with a few of these points so you can summon some groups first. You select the direction you want them to go and they'll move on their own. Contact with an enemy leads up to a 2D battle screen out of your direct control, but the decisions and tactics of any character here can be arranged in the menu before entering a mission. The goal is to kill the enemy commander and also capture enemy bases as you go along. It's an excellent game. You know what? I've made full video reviews of some of these games in this list in case you want to check them out in detail. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. I became a big fan of the first game. What I wasn't expecting is that it will blow me away with 2 things. First, Kazuma Kiryu sharing the protagonism with Ichiban Kasuga. Kazuma is the main character of almost every single Yakuza game before these 2 games, and I'll be honest, I didn't know much about the guy since I had barely touched the series before, but in Infinite Wealth, I learned so much about him and his iconic badassery that I became an instant fan. Anyway, the second thing that impressed me of this RPG was the 2-party idea. I know it's not a popular feature in JRPGs, but I'm a massive fan of games like Final Fantasy IX and Grow Lancer 5, which offer the multiple parties feature story-wise for a part of the whole adventure. In this game, Ichiban and his party take up one whole chapter, while Kazuma and his team star in the next one. Plus, Sunhee wasn't a playable character in the first game, and they made her one in this sequel.